Hi everyone, Aaron here for Zollotech, and today Apple released iOS 26.3 RC, or Release Candidate. The Release Candidate is the final version released to developers and public beta testers before it's released to the public. If there's additional issues, we'll get an iOS 26.3 RC2 and then the final release. We'll talk about when to expect that a little bit later in the video. This came in at 8.52 gigabytes on the iPhone 17 Pro Max, and anytime you go from a beta to an RC or public version, or from a public version back to a beta, you typically have to reinstall everything, so that's why we have such a large install. Along with this, Apple also released iPadOS 26.3 RC, macOS 26.3 RC, tvOS and HomePodOS 26.3 RC, along with visionOS 26.3 RC and watchOS 26.3 RC. They also released an update for iOS 18.7.5 RC, but that's only available for older devices, iPhone XR, XS, and XS Max. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the build number and talk about what's new. So we'll go to Settings, then General, then About. As you can see, the build number is 23D125. And again, this should be the final build. If there's additional issues, we'll have an RC2. But this update does not have a modem update in it for some devices. Some iPads have modem updates, but the 17 Pro Max, for example, does not. So there should be no change when it comes to cellular connectivity. However, it's been pretty good throughout the betas. When it comes to new features, well, if we take a look at what Apple said here with the download notes, it says this update provides important bug fixes and security updates. However, there are some features in here, but they're just not mentioning them. The first thing has to do with transferring to Android. So if we go into our settings again, and this time if we go to General, scroll all the way to the bottom, go to Transfer or Reset iPhone, we have a new option to transfer to Android. Now that we're at the RC, maybe I'll try this out, but you can transfer this directly to an Android phone, whether that's a Pixel or something else, and then it allows you to scan a QR code and again transfer things such as your SIM card and other things. So we'll have to try that out in the future, but again, it's now a new option here. Another new option was something we saw earlier on, but I've confirmed at least in one area it's not available anywhere. That has to do with notifications. In the first beta, we had something called notification forwarding. There were some new options for this, which were supposed to be for third-party wearables, such as watches, but so far it's not here. Someone in the EU said they're not seeing it as well. However, this was believed to be an EU feature. So maybe we'll see it with the final build, but again, it's not showing up in the United States or anywhere else. So let me know if you're seeing that. Another change has to do with wallpaper. So if we go into our wallpaper, as we scroll down, you'll see weather and astronomy. They've now split these into their own respective categories. And one other thing that we typically get this time of year is the new Unity design with the watch band. And we didn't get that with iOS 26.2.1 or iOS 26.3. So it looks like they're skipping that wallpaper this year, and we may not see it. And speaking of wallpaper, if we go into Settings and then down to Privacy and Security, then to Location Services, scroll all the way to the bottom, you'll see that we have a new option for weather wallpaper. So this is something that wasn't there in iOS 26.2.1 or earlier updates, and it allows you to select access for weather if you're using the weather wallpaper specifically. So you can have it use it all the time or only when you're using apps or widgets. So that's something that they've updated as well. Now, in the code in previous betas, we heard about RCS encryption. However, so far, I've not seen it anywhere. So if we go back again, and this time we go down to our apps, if we go into messages and then we scroll down to where we have RCS, there's no real change here. There's nothing about encrypted messages. This was supposed to contain that. Maybe they will push this on the server side or when it releases to the public. But so far in the RC, we're not seeing anything. So let me know if you've noticed a difference, but hopefully we'll have this when it releases to the public. There were also a couple mentions last time from a couple different people where Entel in Peru got a carrier satellite support update, and also there was updates in Japan to get cross-platform eSIM transfer support. So that's something again on different carriers that should be supported to go along with that transfer to Android support. As far as splash screens, I didn't see any this time around. Even in earlier betas, I did get some when I went into the fitness app, but I'm not seeing any at all in any single app. I went through every single one of them. I did get the hello screen on the iPad when it rebooted, but I didn't see that on the iPhone. As far as other releases, well, there's a couple things worth mentioning. One of them has to do with Apple Music. If we go into Apple Music, then we go home here, you'll see that we have Replay 2026. So it's been updated. My son's playlist is on here as well. So it's been updated and you can see that here. So if you want to look at Replay 2026, it's now available. Also, a couple apps were updated. If we go into the App Store, Today, Apple updated Apple Sports, where it says now you can follow men's and women's golf on Apple Sports. Keep up with every PGA and LPGA tournament with live leaderboards, round-by-round scoreboards for every golfer, and real-time updates in the app, widget, and live activities. It also says the soccer lineup is growing, and now it's even easier to keep up with action during tennis matches with real-time stats. So all of that's available if you use Apple Sports, and you can update it right now. Also, there's an update with invites today. So if you're using Apple's Invites app, you'll see that there's an update here. So if we go into it, it says new backgrounds for your big game party are here. The update contains bug fixes and performance improvements. So again, if you go into this, we have some new updates if you want to use those. So you'll see your game day party starts here with a new splash screen, so you can create an invitation with it. Now also yesterday, Apple updated Xcode 26.3 RC. This now allows agentic coding built in, so you can use Claude's agent and OpenAI's codecs. They're directly in Xcode, so if you're coding with this, that's now available and you can download it and then utilize it. There's some videos and tutorials online as well in how you can use it. Now, as far as bugs and bug fixes, there's quite a few things to talk about. The release notes, like I mentioned, just tell you that there's bug fixes, but they don't tell you what there is. However, there's a couple things that have improved. RAM management has improved, so that means going into an app, closing out, it doesn't often reload. Again, going into maybe podcasts, going back into music, it's not reloading, and this seems to be improved with this update. The dock bug is fixed, where sometimes even when you're in dark mode, but you have light icons, the background would be dark. They've now fixed this and it's correct. And also the blue tint issue with the camera has been fixed from earlier betas, where sometimes when you would go in, you would have a blue tint or a blue-white balance on your camera. You'd have to switch lenses in order to bring it back to normal, and that's been resolved in previous updates as well. Also, another update we're not seeing again, or another issue, was when you were using the flash, sometimes it would freeze the camera. That seems to be resolved. As far as Apple CarPlay, we don't really know, but we'll have to test this over the next few days. We'll talk about it in the weekend follow-up video, but many people during the betas said that Apple CarPlay was working much, much better. Also, the keyboard bug seems to be better for most people, at least in the last beta it was, and if we go into Notes. So within Notes, this is the iPhone 17 Pro Max on iOS 26.3 RC. So it seems to keep up without any issue. Now on older devices, we'll have to wait and see. Again, use it for a few days, and I'd love to hear from you about that in the comments, and we'll talk about it in the weekend follow-up video to see if it's stayed improved or if it's gotten worse. Also, the wallpaper bug seems to be improved a bit. Some people said that they reported feedback during the betas, and Apple responded saying it was resolved. I do see it change ever so slightly, but it definitely seems improved. However, it does desaturate just a bit here on the orange part of this wallpaper. One other thing I wanted to mention is on the lock screen, maybe you're changing the widgets here. If we press and hold, maybe go to customize. One thing that's not fixed is if maybe we go and add something else. So maybe the camera here, you'll see it's nice and big here. If I tap done, sometimes it shrinks down and you have a smaller icon. Even though it's the same on this side, sometimes they're mismatched as well. So for example, the flashlight seems to work just fine, but if you change it to something else, it seems to shrink it down for whatever reason. So now they're mismatched in size. So when we hit done, it shrinks, and now you'll see that the camera and the flashlight are different sizes, or they match. Sometimes they don't. It goes back and forth. So it's very odd. Again, if we go here, we'll change it maybe this time to, let's change it to Siri. It looks full size, tap done, and then typically it shrinks way down. It's very odd. Sometimes it does match the icon on the other side, but it goes back and forth, and it's very odd as far as the behavior goes. Now, one other thing that Apple says is broken in this update is if we go into the release notes here, they do say that the continuity features are not working for iPhone 17, 17 Pro, 17 Pro Max, iPhone Air, and iPad Pro M5. However, it does seem to be working for me. For example, if we go to mirror the iPhone, which is supposed to be something that's broken, if we go to the M4 Max MacBook Pro here, give it a second, it will actually work. So it's working fine. You'll see it's mirroring here in the top, and it's definitely working for me. So I'm not having any issues with this, despite their notes saying this is still an issue. However, I just suspect they haven't updated their notes at all, as this is the only thing listed here in their public-facing release notes. When it comes to other updates, well, we do expect some security updates based off of their release notes. It actually says there'll be some. However, we don't see those on Apple's security release website until it's released to the public, and sometimes even hours after it's released to the public. So we'll have to check back once it releases. And speaking of releases, we could see an iOS 26.3 RC2. We could see that later this week, but based on what we've seen in the past, I would expect a public release of iOS 26.3 as soon as Monday or Tuesday. Now, of course, Apple has been a little bit random this time, so we could see that change, but based on what we've seen in the past, that's what we can expect. We can also expect iOS 26.4 Beta 1 either next week or the following week, and that's supposed to incorporate the new Apple Intelligence Siri 2.0 update. We should see that included with Apple's Gemini model running that on their private cloud compute and on device. So those are things I'm looking forward to with that. And of course, we'll see iOS 27 in June, typically at WWDC around June 8th or 9th. So that's what we can expect as far as releases. I would not expect major updates until then, except for that Siri update, maybe some new emoji and things like that. Now, if you're wondering if you should install iOS 26.3 RC, if you're on Beta 3, absolutely install it. If you're on iOS 26.2.1, I would say it's probably safe. So far, it seems very smooth. We'll talk about that in a moment. But most people are saying it seems to be stable, at least over the past hour or two. But again, just be aware that it is a beta or an RC. There could be additional issues. And if you have issues, the only way to roll back is using a computer, whether it's a Mac or Windows computer, and you'll need to have a backup. So just make sure you actually have that. If not, be aware that I probably wouldn't install it until it releases to the public, but it does seem to be pretty good. When it comes to performance, so far it's very, very smooth. Even those on older devices are so far reporting it seems very smooth, whether that's ProMotion scrolling through the app library, just going through different apps or anything else. Things seem to be loading extremely fast, just very reliably. There may have been a little bit of a hiccup there, but in general, the animation seems smoother. Everything is just very fluid this time around. So let me know your experience so far with it in the comments below with performance, but it seems to be doing quite well. When it comes to overall heat, it was quite warm after updating as it was typically installing everything, and it still is a little bit warm here, but let's go ahead and check benchmarks one more time, and then we'll take a look at the overall heat. So while it's testing, when we're about halfway through, we'll take a look at that. So as we're about halfway through, let's take a look at the heat. Typically the processor's in this general area where it gets the hottest. So if we take a look with the temperature gauge here, we're at about 81 degrees Fahrenheit, or at the hottest point so far, this is nice and cool at 27 degrees Celsius. So it seems like it's staying much cooler than it was before, even though it wasn't hot before. So usually it's around 35 degrees. So we'll wait for this to complete, then we'll take a look at benchmarks. Benchmarks completed, and so far the highest score I've seen, at least on this update, is 3,817 for single core, 9,852 for multi-core. This is the fourth time I've run it. You can see the scores here, and it took a while for things to finish processing in the background, but it seems like it's much better. When it comes to overall battery, let's go ahead and take a look in settings, and I've been using this on iOS 26.2.1, and of course it takes a few days to measure that, but you'll see on this device, we'll go down here, battery health. I'm at 100% with just 8 cycles. This is a newer silver iPhone 17 Pro Max. And battery usage yesterday on 26.2.1 was 3 hours and 5 minutes of screen active time, 4 hours and 18 minutes of screen idle time, with 64% used. Today so far, 4 hours and 30 minutes with 4 hours and 7 minutes of idle time at 59%, but it was on the charger, and of course it was an update, and that takes more power as well, but hopefully it improves, and again, we'll talk about that in the weekend follow-up video. When it comes to storage, let's go back and take a look at that. We'll go to General and then iPhone Storage. Let's compare it with Beta 3 that I have here. So if we scroll to the bottom, you'll see Beta 3 is on the left, the RC is on the right, and it's using just slightly more storage at 13.96 compared to 13.95 gigabytes. Very, very slight there, almost identical as far as the size, but when it comes to system data, it's going to use a lot up front as it's calculating a lot in the background, but this goes up and down as needed, so I would pretty typically ignore it unless you have additional issues. And so that's everything so far with iOS 26.3 RC. Hopefully we'll find additional features. Maybe they'll push that RCS encryption update server side, but we'll have to wait and see. Let me know if you've found anything else though in the comments below. And of course, I'll link this wallpaper in the description like I normally do. If you haven't subscribed already though, please subscribe. And if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like. As always, thanks for watching. This is Aaron. I'll see you next time.